Once upon a time, in a quiet little place, there lived an old man and an old woman. They were not rich, and they were not poor. They lived simply in a small house with a garden that the old woman tended and a field that the old man cared for. They had bread to eat, water to drink, and a roof over their heads, yet there was something missing. They felt a hollow space in their lives, something gentle and warm that might curl by the fire, something soft to stroke at the end of the day. They wanted a cat. Not for work, not for guarding, not for show, but simply for company, for a creature to share their silence and their words, their small joys and their hours of loneliness. The old woman would sometimes sit in her chair in the evening and sigh. She would look at the empty corner near the hearth, where perhaps a cat might sit, its eyes half closed, its body stretched and purring. She would say to herself, "How fine it would be to have a cat to keep us company. A cat would bring life into this quiet house." And the old man, hearing her, would nod slowly. Yes, he thought, she is right. It would be a comfort, a soft little friend to brighten the days. He too had pictured in his mind a cat walking about their yard, rubbing against their legs, curling up in the basket at night. They had lived many years without children, and though they had each other, there was sometimes a stillness that weighed heavy. The wind would blow across the hills, the grass would rustle, the crickets would chirp, but the house felt empty of small sounds. No soft paw patting on the floor, no whiskered face peeking at the door, no tiny creature asking for milk. A cat would fill that silence. The old man, as he worked in the field, would think of it. He would bend to pull weeds, and in his mind he would see a cat chasing a grasshopper. He would cut hay and imagine a cat leaping into the tall grass. He would carry wood to the house and imagine a cat climbing the logs, its tail high. Each thought made him smile faintly, though he said little. The old woman, as she stirred her pot or mended her clothes, thought of the same. She would imagine a cat sleeping by the fire as she sewed, a cat licking cream from a bowl as she baked, a cat keeping her company while the old man was away in the field. At night, when they sat together, she would speak of it again. If only we had a cat. It need not be the grandest cat, not the largest or the smallest, not the fanciest, just one that would be ours. The desire grew in them, day by day, until it was not only a wish but a need. The old man could no longer shake it from his thoughts. He saw cats in the shapes of clouds, in the twist of branches, in the patterns of shadows. The old woman dreamed of cats in her sleep, a soft weight curled on her lap, a gentle purr filling her ears. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the fields turned golden, the old woman sighed again. "Dear me," she said, "how lonely it feels without a cat." The old man looked at her, saw the longing in her face, and he made a decision. "Tomorrow, I will go out and find us a cat. I will bring back the prettiest cat in the whole world, a cat to make our hearts glad." The old woman's eyes brightened. "Oh," she said, "how wonderful that would be. But where will you find such a cat?" The old man shook his head. "I do not know yet, but I will walk until I find one. There must be a cat somewhere waiting for us." That night, they went to bed with hope in their hearts. The stars shone above, and the old man lay awake, imagining rows of cats with gleaming eyes, cats with fur as soft as milkweed, cats with tails curling like vines. He pictured the prettiest cat, the one that would belong to them, and he felt a kind of joy stirring in his chest. The old woman too lay awake, imagining the same, and in her mind the lonely house grew warmer and fuller with the presence of a cat. The world outside seemed to listen. The wind carried the faint sound of night creatures, the grass bent in the breeze, and perhaps even the moon smiled down upon the small house where two old souls longed for a companion. In that longing there was tenderness, a gentle ache that made their hearts softer. They were not asking for riches, not for grandeur, not for power, only for the small gift of a cat. Morning came, bright and clear. The old man rose early, filled with a quiet determination. He took his walking stick, put on his hat, and stood at the door. The old woman handed him a small bundle of bread, for the road might be long. She touched his arm and said, "Bring me the prettiest cat in the whole world." And the old man answered, "I will." As he walked away, the old woman watched until he was a speck upon the path. She stood by the door, her heart both heavy and light. Heavy because she would miss him while he was gone, and light because soon, perhaps very soon, their house would no longer feel so empty. She turned back inside, looked at the chair by the hearth, and smiled. Someday soon, she thought, a cat will sit there. The old man walked on, his step steady, his mind filled with pictures. He thought of long-haired cats and short-haired cats, white cats and black cats, striped and spotted, sleek and fluffy. Which would be the prettiest? Which would suit their home? He did not know, but he trusted his heart would tell him. The day stretched before him, and he felt younger somehow, as though this quest for a cat had given him purpose. The sky was wide, the road was open, and somewhere ahead, waiting among hills or farms or villages, was the cat that would end the loneliness of two gentle souls. And in the quiet house behind him, the old woman moved about her tasks with a softer step, her mind humming with hope. She hummed as she swept, she hummed as she baked. And every note was filled with the thought of a little creature who would soon share their days. So it was that their longing for a cat turned from wish to journey. It was the beginning of something new, the first step of a story that would lead to hills filled with countless cats, to choices both hard and strange, and to the gentle gift of a small, humble creature who would one day change their lives. The morning was bright when the old man set out upon the road. The air was cool and clean, the kind of air that makes each breath feel like a promise, and the grass was wet with dew. He leaned upon his walking stick, his hat shading his eyes, and in his heart he carried the words he had spoken the night before. He would not rest, he would not turn back, until he had found the prettiest cat in the whole world and brought it home to the old woman who waited. The path stretched before him, long and winding, and he felt both small and strong upon it. Small because the world seemed so wide, full of places he had never seen, and strong because hope filled him step by steady step. He thought of the empty corner near the fire, the hush of their house at night, and the way the old woman's eyes had brightened when he promised to bring her a cat. That memory pushed him forward. As he walked, he looked this way and that, peering into the meadows, listening at the hedges, hoping to catch sight of a whiskered face or hear the cry of a kitten. But the fields were quiet, the trees full only of birds, and the brooks that ran beside the road sang, with no answer from a cat. He walked on, his eyes searching, his ears straining. He whispered to himself, "Where is the prettiest cat in the world? It must be somewhere, it must be waiting." He met people along the way, a farmer leading a horse, a woman carrying milk, children chasing each other through the grass. He asked them, "Have you seen the prettiest cat in the world?" They laughed kindly, for who could say what was the prettiest cat, and they shook their heads. Some pointed to a barn where a tabby might live, others spoke of strays in the alleys of the village, but none could tell him where to find the one that was truly the most beautiful. Still he thanked them, and still he walked on. The road bent and turned, climbing hills, dipping into valleys. Sometimes the old man's feet grew tired, and he rested a while under a tree, chewing his bread, sipping from his flask. But even as he rested, his eyes wandered, always searching for a gleam of fur, a flick of tail. He saw rabbits darting, squirrels leaping, shadows moving, but never yet the cat he sought. The sun rose higher, and the day grew warmer. The air shimmered on the road, and the grasshoppers clicked. The old man's back bent a little lower, his stick tapped a little slower, But his spirit did not waver. He thought of the old woman again, of how her hands worked so steadily in their home, and of how she had sighed for a cat to share their quiet hours. He thought of her smile when he returned, a cat in his arms, and that thought made his step lighter again. He passed by orchards where the fruit hung heavy, and he thought, would a cat lie in the shade of these trees? He passed barns where hay was piled high, and he thought, would a cat hide there in the straw? He passed gardens where flowers swayed, and he thought, would a cat stalk bees among the blossoms? Always he imagined, always he hoped, but no cat appeared. The day stretched long. He crossed fields and streams, he climbed fences and followed paths. The world around him was rich with life, birds wheeling in the sky, insects humming in the grass, fish leaping in the rivers. But the one life he sought, the soft companion he longed for, was nowhere yet to be found. And still he whispered, where is the prettiest cat in the world? Evening came, soft and golden. The sun sank low, and the old man found himself upon a high hill. From there he could see far, far into the distance, valleys and meadows, rivers winding, woods stretching. The world was wide indeed. He stood there, his hands upon his stick, and he felt the weight of his task. Somewhere, he thought, somewhere in all this world there must be the prettiest cat. I will walk as far as I must. I will not turn back empty-handed. Night fell, cool and dark, with stars pricking the sky. The old man found a sheltered place beneath a tree and sat down. He ate the last of his bread, drank a little water, and leaned against the trunk. The night was alive with sounds, the chirp of crickets, the hoot of owls, the rustle of creatures moving unseen. He closed his eyes, and in his dreams he saw cats. He saw long-haired and short-haired, white and black, striped and spotted, cats with eyes like lanterns, cats with tails like plumes. He dreamed of them walking, running, leaping, sleeping. He dreamed of the one he would choose, the one he would carry home. When morning came, he rose again, stiff but determined. He brushed the dew from his hat, tightened his coat, and set out once more. The road stretched ahead, shining in the early light. His heart beat with purpose, for he knew that each step brought him closer to the cat that would end his loneliness. As he walked, he spoke softly to himself, as though speaking to the unseen cat he had not yet found. Come with me, he said, come home with me. You will sit by our fire, you will drink our milk, you will fill our empty house with life. You will be our friend, our companion. His words drifted into the air, carried by the wind, perhaps reaching ears unseen. The journey went on. He crossed another valley, climbed another hill. He heard voices of people in the distance, the laughter of children, the barking of dogs, but no mewing of cats. Still he did not falter. His legs ached, his back bent, but his spirit was steady. For he was a man who had promised, and he would not break his promise. The world seemed to test him. The road grew rocky, the streams swelled, the brambles caught at his clothes. But he pressed on. With every difficulty, he thought more strongly of the old woman waiting. He saw her face in his mind, lined with years, gentle with kindness, and he thought, she is waiting for me, she is waiting for the cat I will bring. That thought gave him strength greater than any food or drink. The second night came, and again he rested beneath the stars. The heavens stretched above him, vast and quiet, and he felt very small upon the earth. But he did not despair, for he believed, with all his heart, that somewhere under these same stars, the prettiest cat in the world was waiting. On the third morning, the road brought him to a place unlike any he had seen before. The hills rose higher, the grass thicker, the air filled with scents of wildflowers and sweet earth. His heart quickened. Could it be, he wondered, that here he would find what he sought? He shaded his eyes, peering into the distance. He felt a stirring, a sense that his long search was drawing near to its answer. So the old man walked on, steady and sure, his eyes wide, his heart open, his spirit lifted. He did not know what he would find, or how many steps still lay between him and the cat he sought. But he knew this, he would not rest until he had kept his word. Until he had found the prettiest cat in the whole world and carried it home to the old woman who waited, her chair by the fire empty, her heart longing. And so the journey stretched before him, endless and full of hope, a road that wound through valleys and across hills, leading him ever onward toward a discovery that would change not only his life, but the life of every cat he was soon to meet. The old man walked and walked, farther than he had ever gone before, and at last he came upon hills such as he had never seen in all his life. These were not bare hills, nor empty hills, nor hills covered only with grass and trees. These were hills alive, hills filled with movement, hills that seemed to shimmer and ripple as though the earth itself were breathing. He rubbed his eyes, for he could not believe what he saw. All around him, on every hill and every slope, in every hollow and every rise, were cats. Cats as far as his eyes could see. Cats in every color, every pattern, every shape. Cats with long fur flowing like streams, cats with short fur smooth as silk, cats with stripes like tigers, cats with spots like leopards, cats white as milk, cats black as coal, cats gray as smoke, cats golden as the sun. They were everywhere, millions of them, billions of them, trillions of them, stretching over the hills like waves upon the sea. Their eyes gleamed like lanterns, their tails swayed like grasses in the wind, their voices rose in a great chorus of meows and purrs and cries. The old man stood still, leaning on his stick, his mouth open in wonder. Never in all his life had he seen such a sight, nor had he dreamed that so many cats could exist in all the wide world. He took a step forward, and the ground seemed to move beneath him, for the cats parted and swirled like water, flowing aside to let him pass. They rubbed against his legs, they brushed against his hands, they leaped into the air with joy. Their purring rose like thunder, their mewing like a great song that filled the sky. The old man laughed softly, though his heart pounded with awe. Everywhere he looked, he saw more. Upon the hilltops, rows of cats sat like kings, their tails curled around their paws. In the valleys, kittens tumbled and played, chasing their shadows, rolling in the grass. Along the slopes, mothers licked their young, while old Toms stretched and yawned in the sun. The whole land was alive with cats. He whispered to himself, millions of cats, billions of cats, trillions of cats. The words tasted strange and marvelous upon his tongue. He had set out to find one cat, one prettiest cat, and instead he had found more than he could count in 1,000 lifetimes. He walked among them slowly, his eyes wide. One cat brushed against him, soft and white, its eyes like green glass. Another followed him, sleek and black, its fur shining in the light. A striped one darted past, quick as lightning. A golden one leapt onto a rock and gazed at him with calm, wise eyes. Each cat seemed to say, "Look at me, I am the prettiest, choose me." The old man's heart swelled, and he spoke aloud, though no one but the cats could hear. Oh my, how can I ever choose? They are all beautiful, every one. How can I tell which is the prettiest of all? His voice trembled with both joy and sorrow, for the task that had seemed so simple now loomed before him like an impossible mountain. The cats crowded closer, their voices rising. Some meowed sweetly, some purred deeply, some cried out with sharp voices. They leapt and pranced, they rolled and danced, they showed their whiskers, their tails, their bright eyes. Each seemed to say, pick me, I am the one you want." The old man turned round and round, his head spinning with the sight of so many. He climbed a little higher, to see farther, and the vision stretched even more. Beyond the hills he had first seen were more hills, and upon them more cats, endless and countless, until the horizon itself seemed to be made of cats. The sky above rang with their sound, the ground beneath quivered with their steps. The old man felt very small in the midst of this ocean of life. He thought of the old woman at home, waiting in her chair, her heart set upon a cat. What would she say if she could see this sight? She had asked for one, just one prettiest cat, and here were unnumbered hosts, every one claiming beauty. He laughed softly, a laugh full of wonder and bewilderment. He knelt down, reaching out his hand, and a dozen cats pressed against it at once. He stroked one, then another, and another still, each fur softer than the last, each purr sweeter than the one before. "How can I decide?" he murmured. "How can I choose, when they are all so fair?" The cats seemed to understand. They crowded closer, pressing their soft bodies against him, twining their tails about his legs, looking up with eyes bright and pleading. They loved him already, though he had not chosen. They saw in him a friend, a giver of milk, a bringer of warmth, a companion to share their days. The old man stood again, turning in every direction. The hills rolled on, filled with cats. He whispered once more, "Millions of cats, billions of cats, trillions of cats." His voice was lost in the great chorus of theirs, as though the land itself echoed back the words. He knew then that his journey had brought him to the place he sought. He had found not just a cat, but a world of cats, a wonder beyond measure. Yet in that wonder lay his burden. For how could he choose? How could he take one and leave behind so many? His heart wavered, his mind spun. He thought of the promise he had made, the prettiest cat in the whole world. But as he looked around, he saw that every cat was pretty in its own way. The white as snow, the black as midnight, the striped as the forest, the golden as the sun. How could he say one was best when all were fair? He sank upon a rock, his head in his hands. Around him the cats gathered, quiet now, their eyes glowing, their bodies still. They seemed to wait for his decision, their voices hushed, their movements stilled. The whole world seemed to pause, as though the hills themselves were holding their breath. The old man lifted his head, his eyes wet. He looked at the cats, millions and billions and trillions, and he said, "You are all the prettiest. Every one of you. How can I choose one when each of you is beautiful?" His words were soft, but they carried across the hills, and the cats stirred, their eyes brightening, their tails twitching. The choice was no choice at all. The old man knew what he must do, though it seemed mad, though it seemed impossible. He rose to his feet, his walking stick in his hand, his heart pounding. He called out, "Come with me, all of you. Come home with me. You are all the prettiest, and I cannot leave a single one behind." The cats leapt and meowed, their voices rising in joy. They surged around him, a living tide, their purring like thunder, their cries like music. The hills shook with their movement, the sky rang with their sound. Millions of cats, billions of cats, trillions of cats, all answering his call. The old man stood among them, small and frail, yet strong with love. He had set out to find one cat, and he had found them all. He had opened his heart, and the world had poured into it. The journey was not ended, but only begun, for now he must lead them, feed them, care for them. But in that moment he did not think of the hardship. He thought only of the joy, the wonder, the beauty of the countless cats who had chosen to follow him. So the old man turned toward home, and the cats followed, millions and billions and trillions, a sea of fur and tails and whiskers stretching over the land. The hills echoed with their voices, the valleys trembled with their steps, and the world seemed forever changed by their number. And the old man walked at their head, his heart full, his promise kept in a way he had never imagined, leading a host of cats as countless as the stars. The old man stood upon the hillside surrounded by cats, as far as his eyes could reach. The earth was alive with them, the air full of their voices, their fur shining in the light, their tails swaying like grasses in the breeze. He had promised to find the prettiest cat in the whole world, but now, looking upon this vast sea of creatures, his heart grew heavy, for how could he ever decide? He bent down and picked up a little white cat whose fur was soft as milkweed, and he thought, surely this is the prettiest. Its eyes shone like green glass, its body small and dainty. But then a sleek black one brushed against his leg, its fur gleaming like polished coal, its eyes like golden lamps, and he thought, no, perhaps this one is the prettiest. He had hardly finished the thought when a striped cat leaped before him, its back arched, its paws quick, its stripes bold like the markings of a tiger. Oh, said the old man to himself, this one too is beautiful. And even as he thought it, a golden cat sat upon a rock, its fur bright as sunlight, its tail long and plumed, and it gazed at him with wise eyes that seemed to know his very heart. Everywhere he turned there was another, each more lovely than the last. A gray cat whose fur was like silver mist, a calico patched with colors like autumn leaves, a kitten with ears too big for its head, but eyes full of mischief, a grand old Tom with a noble face and a scar upon his ear. Each had its beauty, each had its charm, each seemed to say, choose me, for I am the one. The old man walked among them, his stick tapping upon the ground, his heart beating faster with every step. He tried to steady himself, to think carefully. I must choose, he whispered. I must choose the prettiest cat, for that is what I promised. Yet the more he looked, the more he touched, the more he listened to their voices, the less he knew. One purred like the humming of bees, steady and soothing. Another leapt high into the air, turning a somersault before landing lightly on its paws. Another sat still and calm, its gaze steady, its whiskers twitching with dignity. How could he choose among so many wonders? The cats crowded closer, pressing against him, twining about his legs, lifting their faces to him. Their voices rose in a chorus of meows and purrs and cries, some sweet, some sharp, some deep, some high. The air was full of their sound, the ground full of their movement. The old man covered his ears, for it was too much to bear, yet when he uncovered them again, he heard the same, choose me, I am the prettiest, he tried again. He lifted a tiny kitten whose fur was soft as down, and for a moment his heart melted, for it was so small, so helpless, so sweet. Surely, he thought, this is the prettiest of all. But then he set it down and saw a strong young cat with muscles rippling beneath its fur, its body sleek, its eyes bright, its step full of pride. And he thought, no, perhaps this one is the prettiest. And then another appeared, with a face gentle and kind, with fur as smooth as cream, with a purr that seemed to heal his weariness. And he thought again, ah, perhaps it is this one. The hills seemed endless, the choices without end. He turned round and round, his head spinning, his heart torn. He remembered the old woman at home, waiting, and he whispered, how shall I ever decide? She had asked for the prettiest, but he saw now that there was no one prettiest, no single best. Each was lovely, each was fair, each had something that made it beautiful. The cats knew his struggle, for they pressed upon him more eagerly, showing themselves in every way they could. One leapt and danced, one purred and rubbed, one gazed and waited, one ran and returned. Their eyes shone, their voices rang, their tails waved. They were all saying the same thing, though in many ways look at me, see me, love me, choose me. The old man's legs grew weak, and he sat upon a stone. His hands trembled, his brow was damp. He looked out upon the hills, upon the millions and billions and trillions of cats, and he felt a sorrow as deep as his wonder. For he could not choose, and yet he must. His promise weighed upon him, yet his heart could not single one above the rest. He spoke aloud, his voice quivering. You are all beautiful. You are all the prettiest. How can I say that one is fairer than another, when each has its own loveliness? His words drifted upon the air, and the cats stilled for a moment, listening. Their tails flicked, their ears twitched, their eyes glowed. They seemed to understand his words, yet they pressed closer still, each unwilling to give up the claim. He thought of the journey he had made, the promise he had given, the hope in the old woman's eyes. He thought of the chair by the hearth, the quiet house, the longing that had filled their days. He thought of how one cat would fill that emptiness, but now he saw 1,000, 1,000,000, each one capable of filling it, and his heart ached with both joy and sorrow. He tried once more. He closed his eyes and reached out his hand at random. His fingers touched fur, warm and soft. He opened his eyes and saw a tabby, brown and striped, with eyes bright and eager. Perhaps, he thought, this is the one. But then another brushed against his other hand, and it too was lovely, its fur golden, its gaze gentle. And another rubbed against his back, and another leapt into his lap, and another pressed its head against his shoulder. They were all around him, touching him, loving him, claiming him. He could not choose. He could not choose. His heart cried it. His voice murmured it. His whole being knew it. He could not choose one prettiest, for all were pretty. He lifted his face to the sky, his eyes wet, and he whispered, "What shall I do?" The hills gave no answer. But the cats did. Their voices rose louder, their bodies pressed closer, their eyes shone brighter. They loved him, every one of them, and every one wished to be chosen. The air was thick with their meows, their purrs, their cries. The earth trembled with their steps. The old man stood slowly, leaning upon his stick, his body weary but his spirit firm. He looked around him once more, at the sea of cats, at the endless beauty, at the countless choices, and he said, softly but clearly, "I cannot choose one. You are all the prettiest." The words seemed to ripple across the hills, carried by the wind, heard by every cat. They answered with a roar of voices, a flood of sound that filled the sky. They surged around him, leaping and purring, their joy rising like thunder. They knew then that he would not leave a single one behind. He would take them all, for his heart could not choose. So the old man, trembling but steadfast, made his decision. He would not break his promise, though he had changed it. He had promised the prettiest cat, and he saw now that the prettiest was not one, but all. And so he called to them, "Come with me, come all of you, for you are all beautiful, and I cannot leave you here." And the cats answered with joy, millions and billions and trillions of them, their voices shaking the hills, their bodies surging like a tide. They followed him as he turned toward home, a river of cats flowing behind him, their beauty endless, their number beyond counting. And the old man walked among them, small and frail, yet filled with wonder, leading them onward with a heart that had chosen all, because it could not choose one. The old man lifted his stick and turned his face toward the road that led back to his little home. Behind him the hills quivered, alive with fur and eyes and tails. He had said the words, and he could not take them back. "Come with me," he had told them, "for you are all the prettiest, every one of you." And now the hills were moving, spilling, flowing, as though a great river of cats had been set free. They poured down the slopes, they leapt from the rocks, they streamed from every hollow and every ridge, and they gathered at his heels, waiting for his step to lead them. The old man took one careful pace, and the ground answered with thousands of soft pads, millions of paws. He took another step, and the air filled with mews and purrs, a chorus so vast it seemed to shake the sky. Forward he went, slow and steady, and forward came the cats, an endless tide of fur and whiskers and shining eyes. They followed close, they followed far. They stretched as far as the eye could see, winding over the hills like a living ribbon. The old man looked back, and his heart both trembled and swelled. He had set out to bring home one cat, the prettiest of all, and now he led not one, not a dozen, not 100, but millions and billions and trillions. He shook his head and laughed softly, though there was weariness in the sound. "How will I ever bring them all?" he whispered. "Yet how could I leave them behind?" His stick tapped the earth, and he walked on. The cats followed like shadows of every size and shape. Little kittens tumbled in the grass as they tried to keep up, leaping after the tails of their elders. Sleek young hunters darted this way and that, chasing beetles and butterflies as they moved. Grand old Tums marched with steady pride, their tails high, their eyes wise. Gentle mothers carried their tiny ones in their mouths, keeping pace with the throng. The road became a river of life, flowing, rippling, endless. Everywhere their voices rose. Some purred so loudly the ground seemed to hum. Some meowed high and sharp, eager for notice. Some gave long-drawn cries, while others chirped and chattered. Together their sound was like the roar of waves upon a shore, rising and falling, constant and vast. The old man's ears rang with it, yet he did not stop. They passed through valleys where streams ran clear, and the cats lapped greedily, drinking until the brooks ran low. They crossed fields where grasses swayed, and the cats ate and ate until the meadows were bare. They walked through orchards where fruit had fallen, and the cats batted the apples and pears, rolling them like toys. Everywhere they went, their number shook the land, and the world itself seemed too small to hold them. The old man kept walking. His back bent. His feet ached, but he did not falter. His promise had grown larger than he had ever dreamed, yet he would carry it through. He thought of the old woman at home, waiting by the hearth. He imagined her face when she saw what he had done. She would ask, "Which is the prettiest?" And he would answer, "They are all the prettiest." He laughed again, a laugh filled with wonder and worry, and he pressed on. The cats filled the road behind him like a flood. They climbed fences and toppled them. They ran through ditches and filled them. They stretched across hillsides and covered them. Their eyes gleamed in the light. Countless lanterns, countless stars. Their fur shone in every color: white like snow, black like midnight, gray like smoke, golden like sunlight, orange like flame, patched and striped and spotted. The earth itself seemed painted with cats. Travelers met them on the road and stopped in amazement. Farmers dropped their tools, children cried out in wonder, women at their doors gasped to see the endless parade. Never had they seen so many creatures together, never had they dreamed such a thing could be. Some laughed, some ran, some simply stared, their eyes wide and their mouths open. And still the old man walked, and still the cats followed, countless, unending. Day after day they moved. At night the old man lay down to rest, and the cats lay down around him, their bodies warm, their breathing steady, their eyes glowing in the dark like 1,000 watchful fires. Their purring filled the night, a deep and constant sound that lulled even the old man to sleep. At dawn he rose again, and at his first step the cats rose too, stretching and shaking themselves, ready to follow wherever he went. The land changed as they traveled. Meadows turned to stubble, brooks turned to mud, orchards turned to bare branches. The cats devoured and drank, leaving little behind. Yet the old man did not turn them away. He could not. They had trusted him, they had followed him, and he would not betray them. His heart was heavy, but his promise pulled him onward. Sometimes he faltered, weary with the weight of so many eyes upon him. He would stop and lean upon his stick, and at once the cats would gather round, rubbing against his legs, pressing against his hands, looking up with their endless gaze. Their love was too great, too vast, too heavy, and yet he bore it. For he had said, "Come with me," and they had come. At last, after many days, the road bent toward the place he called home. Far off he saw the fields he had tended, the roof of the little house, the smoke rising faintly from the chimney. His heart leapt, for he had returned. Yet as he looked back at the endless flood of cats behind him, his heart trembled. How would the old woman greet this sight? She had asked for one, and he had brought all. He pressed on, his steps quicker now. Though his body ached, the cats followed, eager, countless, unstoppable. The earth shook with their coming, the air rang with their cries, The sky itself seemed to darken with their number. They poured over the hills, through the fields, down the lanes, a living sea. The old woman stood at the doorway, shading her eyes, looking down the road. She saw her husband, small and bent, walking steadily. She saw what followed him, and her breath caught. She rubbed her eyes, she blinked, but the sight did not change. The road was filled, the fields were filled, the world was filled with cats. The old man came nearer, his stick tapping, his face lined with wariness and wonder. He lifted his hand and called out, "Wife, I have returned." She called back, "What have you brought?" He answered, "I have brought the prettiest cat in the whole world." She looked again, and she cried, "But you have brought them all." And he said, "Yes, for they are all the prettiest, every one." The cats surged around them, filling the yard, climbing the fence, sitting upon the roof, pressing against the walls, filling every space. Their voices rose in a chorus that shook the air, their eyes gleamed like fireflies, their bodies swarmed like waves. The little house seemed to vanish beneath them, the garden drowned in their number, the fields consumed by their presence. The old woman held her face in her hands. Oh my," she whispered. "What shall we do?" The old man leaned upon his stick. His shoulders bowed. He could not answer. He had done what he thought was right, but now he saw the weight of it. They could not feed them all. They could not keep them all. They could not care for them all. Yet here they were, countless, endless, waiting. The cats too were waiting, their bodies pressed close, their voices eager. They loved him, they trusted him, they followed him, and now they looked to him. The yard was full, the house surrounded, the fields alive. Millions and billions and trillions of cats, each believing it was the prettiest, each demanding its place. The old man and the old woman stood together, small and fragile in the midst of this great flood. They held each other's hands, their hearts pounding, their eyes wide. They had wanted one cat, and they had brought all. The promise had grown larger than they could bear, and yet it was theirs, and they could not turn from it. The sun sank low, casting golden light upon the endless fur, the endless eyes. The cats stirred and murmured, restless, eager, hungry. The old man whispered, "What have I done?" The old woman whispered, "What shall we do?" And the cats answered with a roar of voices, millions and billions and trillions, rising into the sky. And so the little house stood trembling beneath the weight of them, and the land itself seemed too small to hold them. The old man had brought them all home, every one. And now the world would know what it meant to promise the prettiest of cats when every cat believed itself the one. The old man set his face toward home and lifted his stick once more. Behind him came the cats, so many that the earth seemed to shiver beneath their paws. Their voices rose in the morning air, a sound that rolled like thunder, meows and cries and purrs all mingling into one vast chorus. The road stretched ahead, and they filled it from edge to edge, a moving carpet of fur and tails and shining eyes. He walked, they followed, and the long march began. At first it was not so hard. The morning was cool, and the dew still lay upon the grass. The cats lapped at it as they walked, their tongues flicking, their whiskers wet, and they purred contentedly. They lipped and played, they rubbed against each other, they swirled around the old man's legs like a living stream. He thought, perhaps this will not be so difficult. Perhaps they will keep pace and be satisfied with what the land gives. He walked on, his step steady, but soon the sun rose higher and the day grew warm. The cats, millions and billions and trillions of them, began to grow thirsty. Their voices changed sharp mews, restless cries, insistent calls. They crowded nearer, tugging at his clothes with their claws, pressing against his hands with their noses. Water, their eyes seemed to say water. The old man felt his heart ache, for he could not give water to so many. Yet ahead, a pond glittered in the sun, its surface bright and inviting. The cats surged toward it, racing past him, their paws flying, their tails streaming. They crowded at the edge, pressing, pushing, their tongues lapping greedily. The water rippled, churned, foamed, and then grew lower, lower still, until the pond was but mud, cracked and dry beneath the weight of their thirst. The cats lifted their heads, their whiskers dripping, their bellies full, and they purred again, satisfied. The old man looked upon the empty pond and whispered, oh my, they have drunk it dry." He walked on, and they followed. The sun climbed higher, and again they grew thirsty. Again their voices rose, louder, sharper, restless as wind in the trees. They crowded around him, and he pointed ahead, for there lay another pond, larger than the first. The cats leapt toward it, their bodies flowing like a tide, and again they lapped, lapped, lapped until the water was gone. Not a drop remained, only cracked earth and reeds trampled under their paws. The old man shook his head and murmured, oh my, what have I done?" The march went on. The land itself seemed to tremble beneath the endless flood of cats. They swarmed over hills and valleys, they filled the roads, they poured through the meadows. Wherever they went, the earth changed beneath them. Fields that had been green turned bare, for the cats grew hungry as well as thirsty. They bent their heads to the grass and ate, millions of mouths tearing and chewing. The meadows grew shorter, shorter still, until nothing was left but stubble and dirt. The cats licked their whiskers, their eyes shining, their bellies full for a moment, and the old man sighed. He passed a brook, narrow but bright, and the cats swarmed upon it. They drank and drank until the stones showed bare at the bottom. They crossed into another field, and again they ate, the grass vanishing before them like snow before fire. The old man watched in sorrow. He had loved his fields at home, his meadows full and green, and now he saw how these cats consumed the land. Yet he could not turn them away. He had called them, and they followed. They trusted him, and he must lead them. Day after day the same. A pond here, emptied. A brook there, dried. A meadow here, eaten to the roots. The cats never slowed, never ceased. Their number too great for the land to bear. Their voices rose constantly, demanding more. They purred when they drank, they purred when they ate, but soon they cried again, thirsty, hungry, endless. The old man's heart grew heavier with each step, yet he could not stop. His stick tapped the ground, and still he walked, for behind him was a sea of cats, millions and billions and trillions, and before him lay home. The sun burned, the days stretched long, and the cats grew restless. They licked their lips, their tongues dry, their eyes sharp. They pushed against him, their claws catching at his clothes. He murmured to them, "Be patient, little ones, be patient, we will find more water, more grass." But his words were lost in their cries. At last they came upon a great lake, wide and deep. The old man thought, "Surely this will be enough. Surely they cannot drink this dry." He sat upon a stone, wary, and watched as the cats raced forward, crowding the shore, pressing into the shallows. They lapped and lapped, their bodies pushing, their tails flicking, their voices humming. The water sank and sank, and though the lake was large, the cats were more. The sun shone upon mud where water had been, reeds bent low, fish gasped in the drying pools. At last the lake too was gone, and the cats purred, satisfied, their thirst quenched for a time. The old man buried his face in his hands and whispered, oh my, they have drunk it all." He rose again, his body aching, his spirit heavy, but still he walked, and still they followed. He thought of the old woman at home, her gentle face, her longing for a cat. He thought of how he had wished to please her, to bring her joy, and now he wondered if joy could come of this. He had wanted one, and now he let all. He had promised the prettiest, and now he had taken every one. The cats paid no mind to his sorrow. They were content when their bellies were full, restless when they were empty, forever following, forever pressing, forever crying. They filled the world with their number, leaving nothing untouched, nothing unchanged. The land itself seemed smaller beneath them, the sky darker above them, the air heavy with their sound. The old man whispered to himself as he walked, "I cannot turn back. I cannot leave them. I have called them, and they are mine." Yet his steps were slow, his back bent low, his eyes weary. For he saw now the weight of his choice, the burden of his promise. The cats were too many for the land, too many for his strength, too many for his home. Yet still he walked, and still they followed, millions and billions and trillions, drinking ponds dry, eating grass bare, filling the earth with their presence. And so the march went on, long and endless, the old man small and bent at the front, and behind him the countless cats, their voices rising, their paws thudding, their eyes gleaming. They trusted him, they followed him, and he could not escape them. The ponds were gone, the grass was gone, the brooks and the meadows were gone, and still they came, never ceasing, never ending, a living flood. The world trembled beneath them, and the old man trembled too, yet he did not stop. For home lay ahead, and his promise drove him forward. Even as the land itself seemed to vanish beneath the hunger and thirst of the countless cats he had called his own. The old man came at last to the little house, his stick tapping upon the worn path, his back bent with weariness, his eyes heavy with sorrow and wonder. Behind him the earth rolled and shifted like a living sea, for the cats had followed him without ceasing, millions and billions and trillions, stretching from horizon to horizon. Their voices filled the air, their paws shook the ground, their eyes gleamed in the fading light. The old woman stood at the doorway, her hands folded, her heart leaping with joy to see her husband return, and then her joy turned to shock, for she saw what followed him. She rubbed her eyes, she shook her head, but the sight did not change. The road was thick with fur and tails, the yard filled, the fields covered, the sky almost darkened by the endless flood. The old man raised his hand and called, "Wife, I have brought the prettiest cat in the whole world." She looked again, her voice trembling, and said, "But you have brought them all. Millions and billions and trillions of cats." He bowed his head and answered, "Yes, for they are all the prettiest, and I could not leave a single one behind." The old woman stepped back, her face pale, and she whispered, "But husband, we cannot feed them all. We have only a little bread, a little milk, a little garden. How can we feed so many mouths?" Her words carried on the air, and the cats heard. Their eyes sharpened, their tails lashed, their voices rose in restless cries. They looked upon each other, and the meaning of her words settled deep into them. They could not all stay, they could not all eat, they could not all be chosen. Only one could be the prettiest, only one could remain. A stillness spread, heavy and strange. The millions and billions and trillions of cats gazed at one another, their bodies tense, their ears flat, their claws ready. The air quivered as though it too held its breath. Then the first hiss split the silence, sharp as a knife. Another answered, and another, until the hills rang with hissing. A growl rose, low and deep, and another growl met it, and another still, until the ground itself seemed to rumble. Eyes narrowed, backs arched, fur bristled. The old man and the old woman clutched each other's hands, their faces white, their hearts pounding. The cats had turned upon one another. The fight began in a frenzy, sudden and wild. Millions of claws unsheathed, millions of teeth bared, millions of cries split the air. They leaped and tumbled, they rolled and bit. They clawed and scratched. The sound was terrible, a roaring, shrieking, yowling storm. The yard vanished beneath the churning mass, the fields disappeared beneath the writhing bodies, the air filled with fur and dust. The ground shook with their fury, the sky rang with their cries. The old man and the old woman backed into their little house, slamming the door, pressing against it as though to shut out the storm. Through the cracks they saw glimpses of tails lashing, eyes gleaming, teeth flashing. They heard the cries of rage and pain, the thunder of bodies colliding, the shriek of claws upon stone. The world outside was no longer land but battle, no longer calm but chaos. The fight spread across the hills. Cats rolled down the slopes, biting and clawing. They leapt upon rocks and tumbled from them. They sprang into trees and dragged each other down. The meadows shook with their fury, the ponds churned with their struggle, the sky filled with their cries. Millions and billions and trillions of cats, each certain it was the prettiest, each determined to prove it, each unwilling to yield. The old man covered his ears, the old woman wept, but the sound filled every corner of the world. Hours passed, and still the fight raged. The sun sank, the stars came out, the moon rose, and still the battle roared. The cats bit and clawed, scratched and howled, leaped and rolled, endless, unyielding. Their eyes shone in the night like countless fires, their cries rose like countless storms. The earth itself seemed to bleed with their fury. The old man and the old woman huddled together in their small house, trembling. They whispered, "What have we done? What have we done?" At last, when the night was darkest, the sounds began to fade. The cries grew fewer, the growls weaker, the hisses dimmer. The writhing mass grew still. The hills lay quiet, the fields empty, the yard silent. The moon shone upon a land bare and strange. The cats were gone. Millions and billions and trillions had fought, and millions and billions and trillions had perished or fled. Not one remained in sight. The old man and the old woman stepped cautiously to the doorway, their hearts heavy. They looked upon the empty yard, the silent fields, the still hills. No fur, no tails, no gleaming eyes, no voices. The land that had been filled to bursting was now bare. The old man whispered, "They are gone." The old woman whispered, "Every one." They bowed their heads in sorrow and in wonder. But then a small sound came, soft and timid, from behind the bushes near the door. A faint mew, weak and hesitant. They turned their heads, their eyes wide, and they saw a little cat step forth. It was thin and small, its fur plain, its eyes gentle. It had not fought, it had not claimed, it had not demanded. It had hidden while the others battled, quiet and humble. Now it came forward, looking up at them with hope. The old woman's heart melted. She bent down and lifted it in her arms. The little cat nestled against her, purring softly, its body warm, its spirit gentle. She looked at the old man and whispered, "Here is our cat." The old man touched its head and smiled through his tears. "Yes," he said, "this is the prettiest of all." And so the great fight ended, and from the millions and billions and trillions of cats, one small, humble, gentle creature remained. It had not fought, it had not claimed, it had not demanded. It had simply waited. And in its waiting it had become the truest, the most beautiful, the dearest of all. The old man and the old woman carried it into their house, their hearts light at last. The storm had passed, the land was quiet, and their home was full, not with countless cats, but with one. And that one was enough. The morning after the terrible fight, the world lay strangely quiet. The hills that had quivered with life were now still. The fields that had shaken with millions of paws were bare. The air that had been torn by yowls and cries was calm. The old man and the old woman stood in the doorway of their small house, looking out with hearts heavy and bewildered. They had seen the earth swallowed by cats, they had heard the roar of their fury, and now they saw only emptiness, a silence too deep to believe. They stepped out carefully, their feet crunching upon the trampled ground. No eyes gleamed at them, no tails flicked, no bodies pressed close. The meadows lay flattened, the ponds torn, the trees scratched and scarred. It seemed as though a storm had passed, a storm made of fur and claws and teeth, and it had left nothing behind but silence. The old man bowed his head. The old woman folded her hands. They whispered to each other, "What have we done?" Then from behind a bush near the door came the smallest sound, faint and trembling, almost too soft to hear. A mew no louder than the rustle of a leaf. They turned, their eyes wide, their ears straining, and again they heard it, timid but clear. Slowly, carefully, they bent down and pushed aside the branches, and there they found it, a little cat, thin and shy, with fur plain and soft, with eyes wide and gentle. It crouched low, its body trembling, as though it feared even to be seen. It had not fought, it had not claimed to be the prettiest, it had not raised its claws or its voice. While the others had raged and battled, this one had hidden, small and quiet, waiting for the storm to pass. Now it looked up at them, its eyes full of hope and fear together, as though asking, "Will you drive me away too?" The old woman's heart melted like wax in the sun. She reached out her hands, slowly, gently, and the little cat did not fleet. It let her lift it, its body light in her arms, its fur soft against her cheek. It nestled close, trembling at first, then purring faintly, a sound as small as a bee's hum. She smiled through her tears and whispered, "Oh, my dear little one, here you are." The old man touched its head with his rough hand, his eyes soft. He said, "Yes, this is our cat. This is the prettiest of them all. For what is beauty without gentleness? What is greatness without kindness? This little one has both." The old woman nodded, cradling it close. "Yes," she said, "this is the cat we have waited for." They carried it into their home, their small, plain house, and set it gently upon the hearth. The cat looked around with wide eyes, then curled itself into a little ball and purred more loudly now, as though it knew it was safe at last. The fire warmed its fur, the air soothed its breath, and the old couple watched with joy. The empty corner was empty no more. The days passed, and the little cat grew stronger. The old woman set out bowls of milk, and the cat lapped with quiet eagerness, licking the last drop. The old man broke bits of bread and gave them, and the cat purred in thanks. It chased a bit of string, it batted at the shadow of a leaf. It leapt at the tip of its own tail. The house that had once been silent was filled with small sounds. Soft paws pattering on the floor, gentle purring at the hearth, the rustle of whiskers in the milk bowl. The old woman sang as she worked, her voice lighter than it had been in years. The old man hummed as he tilled the field, his heart easier, his step quicker. In the evenings they sat together, the cat curled in the old woman's lap or rubbing against the old man's legs, and they felt no emptiness now. They had wanted one, and they had found one, not through choosing, but through waiting. Sometimes they spoke of the millions and billions and trillions of cats they had seen. They remembered the hills alive with fur, the ponds emptied, the meadows eaten bare. They remembered the great fight, the roar of voices, the clash of claws. They shook their heads in wonder, their voices hushed. But always they ended with the same words, and yet from all of them, this little one remained. This gentle, shy, humble little cat, and it was meant for us. The cat grew sleek, its fur shining, its eyes bright. It followed the old woman as she worked in the garden, curling among the rows of beans and peering at the flutter of butterflies. It followed the old man into the field, chasing grasshoppers and leaping after falling leaves. At night it curled between them, its body warm, its purr steady, and they slept more soundly with its comfort near. Seasons turned. The fields ripened, the garden bloomed, the snows came and went. Through it all the little cat remained, their companion, their comfort, their joy. When winter winds howled, it sat by the fire with them, purring like a drum. When summer sun blazed, it stretched in the shade, its fur gleaming like silk. It grew neither proud nor restless, but stayed gentle, humble, true. The old woman would sometimes say, "Do you remember how we longed for a cat, how we thought of one to keep us company?" And the old man would nod and answer, "Yes, and now we have one, the prettiest, the gentlest, the truest." She would stroke its fur and smile, her eyes bright. "Yes," she would say, "we have the one we were meant to have." The old man, too, would sometimes sit by the door, the cat at his feet, and remember the hills full of endless cats. He would shake his head and murmur, millions and billions and trillions of them, and yet only one remained. The cat would look up at him with calm eyes, as though to say, I was the one waiting for you, I was the one meant for your home. And he would nod, stroking its head, and whisper, yes, you were the one. Their life was simple, but no longer lonely. The empty spaces were filled, the silent hours warmed. The cat grew to know their ways, and they grew to know its heart. It was not fierce, not proud, not demanding. It was quiet, gentle, loyal. And in that it was indeed the prettiest of all. So the old man and the old woman and the little cat lived together in their small house, with their garden and their field, their bread and their milk, their fire and their songs. They lived happily, for they had found what they needed, not in the millions and billions and trillions, but in the one who was left when all the rest had gone. And the story of their longing and their journey and their finding became a story not of countless cats, but of one gentle, shy little cat who was more than enough. And so they lived, the three of them, until their days were done, and the little house was no longer empty, but full, forever full, because love had found its place in the form of a small, humble, gentle cat.